The Waltons may have redefined the family drama, but behind the warmth of that porch light and the comfort of those good night lines was a cast marked by grief, illness, and battles fought in silence. The show sold America a promise. No matter how hard life got, love would hold the house together. Yet for several of the people who made Walton's Mountain feel real, love wasn't enough to stop the storm. Fame didn't rescue them. In some cases, it isolated them. It demanded smiles when their bodies were failing, demanded gratitude when their personal worlds were collapsing, and demanded that they keep going because the cameras were ready whether they were or not. And that's what makes these stories so haunting. When you rewatch The Waltons now, you're not just seeing a scripted family navigating the Depression and war. You're watching real people, some young, some already worn down, carrying private pain through every scene. Nearly 5.5 decades later, their journeys still feel like whispers behind the soundtrack. Once you hear what happened to them, the comfort of the Waltons starts to feel like something else entirely. A beautiful illusion built by people who, in many ways, were quietly breaking. Tonight, we're going back to Walton's Mountain, but not for nostalgia, for the truth. Will Geer, Grandpa Zeb. Walton Will Geer was born on March 9, 1902, in Frankfort, Indiana. He was 70 years old when he stepped into the role of Zebulon, Grandpa Zeb Walton, the blunt, mischievous, tender-hearted patriarch who made the Walton home feel timeless. By the time the Waltons began, Geer wasn't simply an actor, he was history. He carried decades of stage and screen experience, and he brought a kind of lived-in authenticity that couldn't be faked. Grandpa Zeb wasn't just written as warm. Geer made him feel like someone who had been breathing that mountain air long before the cameras ever arrived. But behind that beloved presence was a truth the audience couldn't see. Time was already tightening its grip. There's a cruel twist in playing the family foundation when your own health is growing fragile. The role required energy, stubbornness, humor, and a steady sense of life continuing. Yet aging doesn't pause because America's watching. While viewers saw Grandpa as eternal, the man behind him was working against something no contract could negotiate with. The industry that celebrated him for bringing comfort to millions offered little protection from the quiet reality of a body wearing down. As the years passed through the late 1970s, the tension between Grandpa's timelessness and Geer's mortality became unavoidable. The show kept rolling, and the family story kept moving forward. But real life doesn't follow a writer's room. Geer's health deteriorated, and the strain of continuing to work, week after week, under lights and schedules, became heavier. It's one thing to be remembered as America's grandpa. It's another to feel your breath shorten, your strength fade, while still being expected to deliver warmth on cue. Even in a series built on endurance, his endurance was reaching its limit. Will Geer died on April 22, 1978, at the age of 76 from respiratory failure. And suddenly the Waltons, a show about stability, had to face the one loss that stability can't prevent. The tragic irony is that Geer played the person who taught the family how to stay strong, yet his own body could not hold him there. For viewers, Grandpa Zeb felt like the heart of the mountain. In real life, that heart stopped, and the comfort of the show became laced with grief that was not scripted. Ellen Corby, Grandma Esther Walton. Ellen Corby was born on June 3, 1911 in Racine, Wisconsin. She was 61 years old when she became Esther Grandma Walton, the sharp-eyed, no-nonsense matriarch whose voice could cut through chaos and whose love could steady a room. Unlike many who stumbled into fame, Corby had built her career brick by brick across decades. She knew the industry's rhythm, its cruelty, and its indifference. And when the Waltons arrived, she didn't just play grandma. She embodied the kind of older generation the world rarely pauses to honor. But behind the strength of that character was a devastating reality waiting in the shadows. Corby's life would be marked by a health battle so severe that it changed not only her future, but the very structure of the show. In an industry that loves to pretend the body's merely a tool, illness becomes inconvenient. It interrupts schedules, it complicates scripts, and it forces people to confront the truth that no amount of applause can reverse what's happening inside a human being. Corby didn't just face hardship, she faced the kind that strips away comfort, speech, ease, and independence. As the years passed, the decline arrived like a thief. In 1976, Corby suffered a serious stroke. Suddenly, the woman known for precision and command was fighting to reclaim basic functions many people take for granted. Recovery is rarely cinematic. It's messy, humiliating, exhausting. Yet Corby returned, because the show mattered, because work mattered, and because survival itself can become a kind of performance. Viewers saw Grandma as quieter, softer, sometimes limited in dialogue. But what they were really witnessing was an actress carrying the weight of a life altered by a devastating force, pushing through limitations that no one would wish on anyone. Ellen Corby died on April 14, 1999, at the age of 87, from complications of a series of strokes. There's a cruel twist in that ending. She played home, solid, dependable, always present, yet her later years were shaped by the fragility of the human body. Grandma Walton felt unshakable. Ellen Corby was forced to live the opposite, a life where strength was measured not by dominance, but by endurance in the face of slow, relentless loss. Ralph Waite, John Walton, Seater. Ralph Waite was born on June 22, 1928 in White Plains, New York. He was 44 years old when he stepped into the role of John Walton Sr., the steady father whose calm voice and moral center made the Walton family feel safe. Waite's portrayal wasn't flashy, and that's exactly why it worked. He played John Walton like a man who carried burdens quietly, the way fathers often do, absorbing fear, swallowing exhaustion, and still showing up as the rock everyone leaned on. At the time, the Waltons elevated him into something rare, a national symbol of decency. But behind that calm strength was a life marked by private battles and profound sorrow. The cruel twist of fame is that it can trap a person inside their own image. Waite became America's dad, and with that came expectations that didn't care what he was going through when the camera stopped. He faced personal grief and struggles that carved deep lines beneath the surface. In real life, being the steady one can be a lonely assignment. People assume you're fine. They assume you don't break. And the industry that celebrates your strength often offers little when you need support. As the years passed, the bright glow of the show shifted into a different kind of light: nostalgia. Waite continued acting for decades, but the world often reduces actors to their most famous role. That reduction can feel like a cage. Meanwhile, real life keeps happening. Losses, aging, the slow wear of time. Through the later decades, his journey carried that haunting contrast. The man who played stability navigating the instability of human life. And even when work continues, grief doesn't evaporate. It settles. It becomes something you carry in your chest, quietly, until the weight feels like part of your breathing. Ralph Waite died on February 13, 2014, at the age of 85, from natural causes. Yet even a phrase like natural causes can't capture the emotional truth of an ending. There's tragic irony here. The man who gave millions a sense of safety ultimately faced the same unstoppable reality as everyone else. A tragic fate for someone who embodied strength, because strength, in the end, cannot bargain with time. The father of Walton's mountain became a memory, and that porch light felt dimmer ever after. Judy Norton. Mary Ellen Walton. Judy Norton was born on January 29, 1958, in Santa Monica, California. She was only 14 years old when she stepped into the role of Mary Ellen Walton, the ambitious, sharp, determined eldest daughter who always seemed to be growing up faster than the world would allow. At the time, Norton was a teenage actress thrown into the pressure cooker of a hit series, expected to be wholesome, disciplined, camera-ready, and emotionally convincing while still learning who she was. But behind the wholesome image was a life that would later be shadowed by painful experiences that many viewers never imagined. Child stardom can look like a dream from the outside, but beneath it often sits a hard truth. Growing up under constant judgment can distort self-worth. The industry that celebrates youth also consumes it, and for young actresses especially, the pressure to stay acceptable can become its own quiet trauma. While the Waltons portrayed a protective family world, Norton, like many young performers, had to navigate adulthood without a real script for survival once the show ended. As the years passed into the decades after the Waltons, the transition away from childhood fame carried its own brutal challenges. Roles didn't always come easily, and the public's memory can be unforgiving. People want you frozen in time as the character they loved. Behind the scenes, adulthood brought personal upheavals, and like so many former child stars, Norton had to rebuild her identity outside the shadow of Walton's mountain. That rebuilding can be lonely. It can be humiliating. It can feel like starting from zero while the world insists you should still be grateful for what you once had. Judy Norton is still living, and her legacy carries a different kind of tragedy. Not a sudden ending, but the long aftershock of early fame. A tragic fate for someone who spent her youth making comfort for others, only to discover that comfort is not guaranteed when you step off set. For some, survival isn't dramatic, it's quiet, it's daily, and it's earned. Mary Elizabeth McDonough, Erin Walton. Mary Elizabeth McDonough was born on May 4, 1961 in Van Nuys, California. She was just 11 years old when she stepped into the role of Erin Walton, the dreamy, romantic, sensitive daughter who wore hope like a ribbon and heartbreak like a secret. At the time, McDonough was a child actor in one of America's most beloved series. Growing up under lights that never stopped shining, her face became familiar to millions before she even had a chance to understand what that kind visibility costs. But behind the sweetness of Erin Walton was a life marked by struggle, especially as adulthood arrived with battles that don't show up in a script. The cruel twist is that audiences remembered her as delicate and bright, while real life forced her into a different kind of endurance. She dealt with serious health challenges, including lupus, an illness that can invade a body like an invisible storm. Autoimmune disease is especially cruel because it often can't be seen. People expect you to look fine. They expect you to function. They expect you to keep smiling. And the industry that once rewarded her for being America's sweetheart was never designed to support someone whose body was turning unpredictable. As the years passed, the decline wasn't about scandal or a single shocking headline. It was about the slow erosion of normal life. Chronic illness can steal energy, steal plans, steal the future you assumed you'd have. Work becomes harder, stability becomes fragile. And the emotional weight, the constant calculation of pain, fatigue, uncertainty, can grind down even the strongest spirit. McDonough's journey became one of survival rather than spotlight. The kind of survival that doesn't get applause, because it happens quietly in doctors' offices, in private exhaustion, in moments where you decide to keep going even when your body argues otherwise. Mary Elizabeth McDonough is still living, and that fact matters, because sometimes a tragedy isn't an early death. It's the long fight to stay here, to keep your life together, and to carry the weight of an illness that never truly clocks out. A tragic fate for someone who spent her childhood offering audiences hope, only to face a reality where hope had to be rebuilt again and again. John Walmsley. Jason Walton. John Walmsley was born on February 6, 1956 in Blackburn, Lancashire, England. He was 16 years old when he stepped into the role of Jason Walton, the quiet, soulful musician of the family, gentle, introspective, and often more comfortable expressing himself through sound than speech. At the time, Walmsley was a young performer whose identity was still forming, yet he was already locked into a public image, broadcast into millions of homes every week. But behind that calm on-screen presence sits the haunting reality faced by so many young actors. What happens when the show ends and the world moves on? Fame can be intoxicating, but it can also be isolating. It can make real friendships feel uncertain, and it can make ordinary life feel unreachable. The industry that celebrates you as a teenager often offers little guidance for how to become an adult. And when audiences keep seeing you as the kid you were, your growth can feel invisible. That kind of invisibility can become its own shadow. A quiet grief where you realize the world remembers you, but doesn't truly know you. As the years passed, Walmsley shifted his life toward music, carving a path outside the acting identity that had defined him. Reinvention can be freeing, but it can also feel like disappearance. One day you're part of an iconic American family on television, and the next you're fighting to be recognized for your real talents rather than the role you once played. The tension builds over decades. The public clings to nostalgia while you're trying to live forward. That disconnect can create a strange loneliness, the feeling of being famous for someone you no longer are. John Walmsley is still living, and his story carries a quieter tragedy, the long echo of youth fame. A tragic fate for someone who brought music and tenderness to Walton's Mountain, only to learn that outside the show, life doesn't always offer harmony. Sometimes it offers a long, uncertain silence, and you have to compose your way out of it. Michael Learned. Olivia Walton. Michael Learned was born on April 9, 1939 in Washington, D.C. She was 33 years old when she stepped into the role of Olivia Walton, the family's spiritual center, the mother whose compassion held everyone together, even when money was tight and the future looked frightening. At the time, Learned was an actress with serious skill, and the Waltons turned that skill into something legendary. Olivia Walton wasn't just the mom. She was the emotional architecture of the entire series. But behind that gentle strength was a life that carried its own shadows. Playing the embodiment of maternal stability can be a heavy burden, especially when your private life is complicated, painful, or unraveling. The cruel twist is that the more comforting your character becomes to the audience, the more pressure you feel to remain okay in real life. The industry that celebrated her as the perfect mother figure offered little when real-life pain pressed in. And like many in Hollywood, Learned faced personal struggles that didn't fit the clean image viewers wanted from her. As the years passed into the late 1970s, cracks began to show, not on screen, but behind the curtain. The demands of constant production can deepen existing problems: stress, emotional exhaustion, and the sense that you're living two lives, one for the world and one you're desperately trying to hold together. Through that decade and beyond, her journey carried the weight of reinvention, recovery, and the challenge of stepping away from the role that defined her. Fame can become a trap. Leave it, and people say you disappeared. Stay, and you risk losing yourself. Either way, the cost is real. Michael Learned is still living, and her legacy is threaded with poignant irony. She gave audiences a mother who seemed unbreakable, yet her real life reminds us that strength is often a performance people put on while fighting battles no one claps for. A tragic fate for someone who represented comfort itself, because comfort is something you can deliver to millions and still struggle to find for yourself when the lights go out. The Waltons remains a masterpiece of family drama, a show that still feels like a warm blanket pulled over a cold world. But the real lives behind it were far more complicated than any storyline. From bodies betrayed by time, to illnesses fought in silence, to the emotional ruin that can follow childhood fame, these cast members carried stories the cameras never captured. The porch light may have glowed on screen, but off-screen, many of them were shadowed by battles that didn't end with a good night. So now I want to ask you, after hearing these journeys, which one struck you the most? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because next time we're digging deeper into the forgotten truths behind Hollywood's greatest legends and the heartbreaking cost of the classics we thought we knew.